What is up, guys? Teddy Cornwell here. Welcome to the Underdog Talk podcast, the world's most underrated podcast on earth. But today we're joined by Olympian hero, Olympian medalist, part of the USA women's rugby team. The one and only Spiff Sedrick. How are you doing today, ma'am? How's everything going?
It's good. It's been so crazy the last couple months. So just kind of getting back into a groove, but happy to be here. Happy to be talking to you guys.
And you are our second Olympian on the podcast. Obviously, shout out to our guy, Ryan Lochte. And just like Ryan, you turned the world's eyes. And when I say that, you may have one of the greatest plays in sports history. Obviously, I'm talking about that final run against Australia. Now, leading up to that, before we even dive deep into that, why rugby? Why was that something you fell in love with? Obviously, you played in high school and you're a multi-sport athlete, but why decide to continue rugby professionally, Spiff?
I don't know. I make the joke that it just kind of kept happening for me. Like I was playing in high school and they're like, "Oh, you're pretty good at this. You should play on this team." And I'd be like, "Okay." And then they're like, "Oh, you should play for the national team in the age grade programs, like U18, U20s, U23s." And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "You should play in college." And I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to go to college." Like I didn't at the time want to pursue an education, but I did so as an avenue to keep playing rugby. But yeah, I grew up doing gymnastics, very individual sport. So to be a part of a team sport and to be competing with a group of girls rather than against them was just something that I liked way better.
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective on that. Obviously, superstar at Life University, superstar there. And, how big is collegiate women's rugby? Obviously, I see it growing, I see it getting that attention. But when you went, was that a big thing yet, or was it still on the up and up?
It was still coming up. When I was in college, there was really only, ooh, this might be controversial. There's really only like 4 or 5 like really competitive schools. And what would happen was we would play in our own separate regions, and my team would be blowing teams out of the water like triple digits to zero, like 70 to zero, like just ridiculous numbers. But then when it was time to go to nationals, all those games would be like super tight with Central Washington was a great school, Lindenwood, Penn State had a good run at it. And then, the Ivies, like we didn't really play against them in 15 so much as we did in sevens. But yeah, the growth of the game, I feel like has been a lot better throughout the last couple of years. I've been out of college for a while, kind of showed my age there. But from what I see, like there's just a lot more schools that people will commit to. Like I know a couple of girls that have committed to Harvard. I know they're a great program. Quinnipiac, one of my teammates now, was an alumni of that program. So it really just depends on where it is. And I feel like it ebbs and flows with like participation because like sometimes, basketball will get huge media, with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and like that will be like the big sport that young girls really, really want to do. But then you see something like what my team did in the Olympics, and then we get a huge spike in interest of like, okay, now girls are wanting to play rugby. So really it just kind of like depends on the flow of the game.
And you know what? I just got to talk about it. It was the greatest play in sports history. What was going through your mind? Obviously, one stiff arm and then another stiff arm. What was going through your mind when all this happened? Do you even remember that moment, or do you just remember scoring it? What was that all like?
I think so. Yeah, I remember it, and I was just thinking like, okay, Australia is a great defensive team. There's a lot of defenders in front of me. I just hope that I keep possession and just don't get a turnover. Like there's such a good team. I don't know how familiar you are with rugby itself, but like there's such a good turnover team. So they're really good at just tackling and taking the ball right out your hands. So I was like, just don't give up possession. Don't give up a penalty. Just place it back. We'll recycle. We'll keep going. It's fine. And then when I slipped out, I was like, oh, shoot, like, cool. And then I just tried to run really fast. And it felt a lot faster in my head. When I watched it back, I was like, oh my God, whatever. It did the job, but I was like, wow, that was in my head.
Again, a play that goes on in history. How do you feel that you're now in the history books? Has that even set in 3 months later?
I mean, it's kind of weird to think about because rugby generally isn't a sport that gets a ton of fan support in the US. The people who do watch rugby, they really show up for us and they're really diehard fans and we love them. But, in terms of like other sports that people are usually fan bases of in the US, we have a huge college base. So, like, college football is huge, college basketball, even like soccer gets in there sometimes. So it's like to have a sport that's kind of like an underdog in the US. It's kind of weird to consider that like that moment will live on in history of like the Olympics, but it simply does just because of the magnitude of like, okay, this is our first sevens medal. So it's like anytime someone thinks about like, oh, when was the last time we did this, or when was the first time we did this? Like I know it'll come up and that's cool. But yeah, it's just kind of weird.
I don't think it was just the first time. Obviously, it was the first time, but I mean, the way it happened. I mean, that's like a movie. It's a movie play. We're watching a movie, and you not one, but again, I just got to say this: two stiff arms, and I feel really bad for number 5. I mean, because that was vicious. And I mean, do you see rugby going in the right way in general? Obviously, the Olympics are really propelling it. We just had the one in South Africa a year ago, and that's really drawing attention. Do you see the sport of rugby going in the right way in general?
Yeah. And again, it's like it's tough because we do compete with so many other sports. Whereas in countries like Australia, France, New Zealand, Fiji, they're picking up a rugby ball like when they're very, very young, or even like Australian football rules. So it's like those countries are so familiar with the movements and the vision and like the strategies of play and stuff. So to have girls on my team be crossovers of like track, wrestling, myself, gymnastics, and volleyball, it's just like we're having to learn this sport, and we're kind of like we're not really like rugby players yet when we can come to the sport. We're athletes that are learning how to play rugby. So I hope with what we were able to do in Paris, I'm hoping that America's raising more rugby players rather than athletes that play. I have so many talented athletes on my team, but you just look at the difference of like depth and just like skill level of like where other countries are at the moment and like where our depth is. I'm really hoping that girls in America are starting to pick up a rugby ball at a younger age.
If you could change kind of one perception or a misconception, people have about rugby or female rugby players, what would that be?
I think maybe it's controversial, but that it's like a dangerous sport. It's like it's no more dangerous than, soccer has plenty of ACL tears, basketball might have like sprained ankles, stuff like that, volleyball, shoulder injuries. When done correctly and when trained at the like, proper phases of wherever you're at skill wise, is really not as dangerous as what some people may think. Obviously there are big collisions, but there can be that with wrestling, with football, like there's all these other sports that people just look to first. And I think people kind of don't view rugby as something that can give them a whole lot of value if they are using it as a cross training method, just because, I think the competitive level within the US for like whether it's high school or college is sometimes not to the same level as other countries. So if they're looking to cross train, they might just solely get like a specific skills coach for something else. So, I mean, I hope that it's moving in the right direction, and I hope that the perception isn't that it's like, oh, it's too dangerous for girls to play.
And obviously, rugby is, like you said, it's not just about that brute strength. I mean, there's so much more to the sport, the strategy. Now, what is off-season training like for you to be an Olympian, rugby player, to be a superstar like you are? What is your off-season training like?
So I haven't really had like an off season in years. Right now, I guess you could technically say I am in one, just because of the Olympics, and also I'm rehabilitating some injuries that I received in Paris. So at the moment, it's a lot of physical therapy, a lot of massage and body work, some strength training, and off feet conditioning at the moment, like just trying to reduce the load on my spine and impacts, and just really keeping the lungs in a space where they can breathe heavy, but I can still move.
And kind of keep on wanting to go back to the Paris Olympics because it's just so sensational. What was that moment like when you heard the anthem of this country and you got that bronze medal on you? I mean, what were the emotions that you just obviously made history representing the United States of America and made the country so proud? Would you mind talking about those emotions?
Yeah, again, I grew up doing gymnastics, so I would watch the podium. The US is making the podium every Olympics for gymnastics. So the very first one that I can remember is seeing Carly Patterson get the gold medal in 2004 in Athens, and just like the happy tears and like getting the honor of being medaled. So that moment was really cool for me. It is kind of funny though, because I had pictured how that would go like every day for, almost 20 years of like, okay. And then you bow and then they put the medal on. And when I like went down to like, go down to this lady's level who's like giving me my medal, my bun got stuck in her glasses. And I was like, oh my God. And I sat up and her glasses are like hanging off my hair. And I was like, this is not how I pictured this moment. But no, it was amazing. It was, no words to describe like what was going on inside. Just outside, I was like, there's glasses in my hair. Nice.
And going back to it all, I think again that lasting impression you made on girls and young women growing up to now are more aware about the sport. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it shone so much light on it, and now going into 4 years, in 4 years, you're going on our home turf. I
Mhm.
mean, have you thought about that yet? Is that in a future goal for you? And obviously now you guys are not necessarily the underdogs. I mean, you guys are there. What does that all look like?
Oh, I mean, LA 28 is, it's 4 years away. So it's like, it's so hard to be able to tell, like, will I be in cleats or will I be in the stands? Like at the moment, it's just like kind of taking it season by season and seeing what happens. I'll for sure be in LA that summer, but yeah, I'm just so grateful that we were able to put out a performance that would excite American fans because like say we had won by 20, but we didn't win in that way. I don't think that the media attention would have been as high, even if we had medaled, or say that we had made it to the final and gotten silver. Like I still don't think that it would have gotten the attention that it did. I think the thing that American fans like so much about what happened was like the drama of it all and like the electricness and like it's a last second ditch effort. There's like power, there's speed, and then there's like, the kick. And so it's like there's just so many assets or aspects of the game that, if you don't really like watching the contact area, it's like, okay, well, do you like watching people run fast and stuff like that? So I mean, for LA, again, we're hoping that girls are picking up a rugby ball at a younger age and really pushing the skill level of American rugby players, and then also the depth of our bench. So we have a much wider pool to pick from athletes to like be able to represent our country. I'm so grateful to be a part of the pool that did go on to Paris, but like we know that the potential in our country is like so high. People tell us all the time, just even the amount of people that we have in our country. People are like, oh, if they like figured it out how to like grow grassroots rugby and stuff, like they could be an unstoppable like rugby powerhouse. So yeah, really hoping that an LA performance shows out with a ton of home soil fans and really just athletes that are so proud to represent our country and just really excited to show our American brand of rugby.
And I think it's almost like soccer. Obviously, we're starting to become a name in soccer, especially American soccer. Obviously, other countries they grow up kicking the ball, kicking
Yeah.
soccer, just like you talk about kicking, playing rugby and stuff like that. But we're getting on that playing field. I mean, with obviously people like Christian Pulisic in the soccer field, and then obviously the women's soccer just outstanding over the
Yeah.
years. And now women's rugby. I mean, it's an exciting time for American sports, especially in the Olympics for sure. Now, rugby teaches so much more than just obviously being an athlete. I mean, what to you uh, has rugby taught you about kind of yourself and something you've kind of carried outside of the sport into your personal life?
Oh my God, so much. I think probably the biggest thing is just learning how to work in a team. We do a lot of events where corporations will come and try to do team building exercises with our team. and we do little clinics with them where we like play little games and we're like, okay, here are the rules, here's the goal, like now work together in a team. And it's so interesting to me to see these like corporate executives who have like desk jobs and office jobs and they don't know how to like or not that they don't, they're not super effective in like working together to reach a common goal. And obviously it's out of their comfort zone. It's not like a marketing campaign or like a sales report, whatever. It's like a game. But when you really boil it down to like, what are we trying to do and how do we get there? That's the teamwork that I have to work with every single day with my team. And again, coming from an individual sport like gymnastics, is like I never had to do that. So definitely being able to, you know, work with the other people, and even if personalities clash, like figuring out how it is that we get to where we want to go together, because at the end of the day, we are in the same team and we do want the same thing. And I think I've been able to pull that into my personal life, just being like more effective in communication and just managing my emotions when maybe someone does something I don't want them to do. It's like, okay, well, understanding, you know, it's going to be fine and we can't control everything. Because when I did gymnastics, it was like I was in control of everything that I was doing. Whereas team sports, it's like I can't control what my teammates do and I can't control, you know, what our opposition does. So it's kind of just letting go of the outcomes of things and just being more like process oriented.
Yeah, believing in yourself and believing in the team is the main thing, because you guys are all there together and each person's contributing that stuff. As we saw with you guys, each person was bringing something. I mean, and the women had so many emotions. It's like you guys were just, again, in perfect sync, I guess would be the words when I was watching it. You guys were just one team representing, you know, the greatest country on earth. Now, obviously, rugby has kind of always been more focused on, you know, the male aspect, and it is starting to become more female dominated. You know, what has been your experience as a female rugby athlete? And then obviously you are using your platform to inspire others. So what is all that like?
I mean, again, it's like the initial responses that we get usually when someone will be like, "Oh, what sports do you play?" And I'll say rugby, and then it's like one of two things. It's like, "Oh, I didn't know women play rugby." And then the other response will be like, "Oh, is that the one with the sticks?" And I'm like, "No, that's lacrosse." But anyway, it's like that was much more so when I was like in high school, and so like in recent years, times have changed, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you follow like maybe some of my teammates or some personalities on my team, and we across like Alona Mar, Sammy Sullivan, Ari Ramsey, like we do have like huge followings in those aspects of like people are really looking at our team and not just us as a whole, but the individuals that make up our team, and really getting to get behind an individual and be like, I support this person. I love their message. I love their personality. Oh, and they're a part of this whole group of women who are also trying to do the same thing. So it's like, I think it's easy for people to look at my team and find somebody that they want to cheer for, because we are all so different and we have such different stories and messages that, you know, even say someone doesn't like me particularly, but they're like, oh my God, Sammy's hilarious. I love her content. Or like Lo is just like so inspirational, all this stuff. So it's like, I think women's rugby is really such an exciting place right now, because people are finding out like you don't have to be a specific body type or personality or skill background or like come from a certain sport. It's like anything. We're a huge melting pot of diverse women that are again coming together to try to reach this goal. So it's kind of like it's kind of really chaotic at times, but at the end of the day, it's really fun.
I think you just gotta want it. I mean, speaking of your run, I mean, I think you wanted that more than anyone else in the world. I mean, you could see the emotions. You were not going to be stopped. I mean, that was pure heart, pure hustle. And now, what would your biggest tip for someone who is, you know, male or female, looking to get into the sport of rugby, whether that be at the high school level or even just starting in club and
Mhm.
working at college and then up the ladder? What would your biggest tip of advice be?
I think just know that there's always going to be a place for you somewhere. And maybe you want to do it more of a social for fun thing, kind of make friends and just get out and stay active. And there are clubs out there for you like that. Or if you want to be more competitive and really, really drive to play at the top of the level, then there are also teams out there for you. And I think that there's no right or wrong way to play. You know, I know people who just play touch rugby, or they just play on like beach tournaments or for fun. And it's like anything that you want to do within the sport is always welcome. Our rugby community is like very small in the US, so everyone kind of knows everyone. So that's kind of a fun aspect to it. And again, there's going to be a place for you no matter what your goals are or kind of what you're interested in. Just go out there and see what happens. And if you try it out and you don't like it, it's fine. The worst thing that happens, maybe you make a couple friends or learn team building from a new perspective.
Or you can stiff arm someone and feel like an absolute beast. And, this is the Underdog Talk podcast, kind of about that underdog. What has been your biggest underdog moment in your life where you kind of overcame it, were doubted per se, and just rose and shone to the occasion?
It's hard to beat what we did in Paris. For us, we didn't view ourselves as underdogs. We view ourselves as being very capable of competing with some of the top in the world. Australia being, amongst the top in the world. Obviously an excellent team. They won the World Series championship. New Zealand came out and won like most of the events on the series. We know if we do the things and we execute on the skills that we've been working on, that we can hang with some of the best in the world. So not necessarily us thinking that we're the underdog, but just having so much media and fans just like not expecting us to win. Like, I don't think if you look at those two teams on paper, I don't think anyone would have blamed us for losing, because we hadn't beaten them all season long. And we had gotten close a couple times in Vancouver. We took them to sudden death at the end of regulation, and they still won. In LA in March, in the semifinal, it was tied with like seconds left, and they had a long break and they scored to win it. So, we've always viewed ourselves as of being like right there, but from the outside perspective, I know a lot of people saw us as the underdogs, and sometimes the underdog is like so fun to cheer for. And sometimes you just want absolute domination of like your team to win. So, I think that definitely the Paris Olympics was a moment where, again, people were probably not expecting us to win, especially with Australia scoring with less than 2 minutes left. And the kicking deep for them, like that's probably a tactic that we might have used as well. I don't know. It's very common. France and New Zealand do that as well when they're up and just kind of backing their defense. But the thing about underdogs is like they don't really have any quit in them. So maybe that's an aspect where we share that. But yeah, I definitely think that people were not expecting us to show out that way.
Again, because Australia, women's dominance in rugby has just been, that's just a known fact, and they're not a tough. They're a tough team to beat, and that's what it comes down to. Now, final question: what is next for you? Obviously, you're talking about kind of that recovery. When do you plan on going back to the game? What's that all looking like for you?
So as of right now, I'm doing physical therapy, and it's up to doctors and my athletic trainer, Nicole Timmis. It's up to their discretion, like when I'll be able to rejoin. But right now, just training remotely. And when it's time for me, hopefully I'll be back into full time in January. But, again, we'll see.
And an honor and privilege to have you on the podcast. Now, before we go, the floor is yours. Where can we find your social media? Anything you're working on? Obviously, I see you're constantly on the move, but the floor is yours.
My Instagram is at SPIIFFF, I think. And my business email is contactspiffsedrick@gmail.com. But yeah, I'm at the moment I'm doing speaking engagements, appearances, just kind of, having a little bit of a tour before I get back into full-time training.
And first 10 people to follow on the Instagram, send us a DM. We'll get you a special thing out to you, because you gotta love the hero of the United States women's rugby. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this. Until next time, the Underdog